Businesses tend to focus on revenue, profits, and getting loyal customers. But how about healthy workplace culture? You're listening to How I Turned the Corner, where Kendra Prospero leads eye-opening conversations that most business leaders avoid. The right way to address employee challenges. Listen to real-life stories of workplace struggles, giving you valuable advice on what must be done to make every employee truly satisfied and fulfilled in their job. This is for leaders who want to create great company cultures and for employees who want to do something to put an end to suffering at work in the most practical ways possible. Here's your host, Kendra.
Folks, it is not normal to have high turnover. I just have to say this. If you do have high turnover, you might also be struggling with finding people to backfill your jobs. And because of that, you're probably not able to meet the needs of your customers because you just don't have enough people to do the work. If this is your case, you've got to listen to today's episode. We've learned over time that the number one thing all leaders can do to improve their employees' experience is to care for them. Google spent millions of dollars to understand what they could do to improve the employee satisfaction. And the conclusion was this: care for your employees. Well, our guest today knows this intuitively. Instead of spending millions of dollars, Rachel Johnson spends her most precious resource, time, and sometimes the occasional $40 to show she cares about her team. She is the CEO of Trek Armored Group. In the armored car industry, you know, the big trucks with the armed drivers that move cash and goods around safely and securely. Well, I'll tell you what, this whole industry needs to turn the corner. This is an industry that suffers from 400 to 600% turnover among their hourly employees. Yeah, let that sink in. These companies struggle to backfill these openings, and this is an industry that has more customer demand than an ability to serve it. However, for Rachel, she has a different story. In a highly competitive job market in Atlanta, in a notoriously difficult industry, she has beaten all the odds and has very little turnover, great customer service, is highly profitable, and she has peace of mind when it comes to running her business, all due to the care she gives her staff. Rachel Johnson, welcome to How I Turned the Corner. I am so excited to share your story with our audience.
Thank you.
So tell us, give us the backstory on your organization.
Okay, so previously I had experience in the armored car industry with another company, and we had quite a few employees, multiple locations. I had 42 employees actually in the location that I'm at now is central to Atlanta. And so I worked there for quite a few years and ended up starting my own company in 2019, the very end of 2019, and kind of expanded from there. And so here I am.
And so tell us about your organization.
Sure. So Trek Armored Group, like I said, I started in 2019, and it's a small armored car carrier, not the giant ones like Brinks or Loomis, but so we're mostly metro to Atlanta. We'll go some outside of the state, depending on, what's needed. I run freight as well as your standard cash and transit vehicles. So moving cash.
Yep. Okay.
High value goods.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how many people do you have?
So I have some part-time, some full-time, and I have 4 full-time, and then just part-time kind of ebbs and flows depending on what we need. And so I have multiple people that I'll utilize part-time.
Okay, that's great. That's excellent. So that's an unusual thing in this industry to have part-time employees. I think that's a good strategy though. How does it work? Yeah.
For this industry, because you don't always, especially in terms of moving freight, you don't always have shipments every day. It's not always consistent. So to be able to have people that you can pull from at last minute, 1 or 2 day notice is very helpful. So I have quite a few people that I can utilize for those types of jobs that we do.
Mm-hmm. So describe some of the things that you do with your team to just help them feel like they matter.
All right. So my team is a lot smaller than it was at the other company. So it's a lot easier to plan out my little antics that I take care of. But when there was a lot larger group, I would try to put everyone's birthday on like a spreadsheet and things like that. So then that way you could acknowledge their birthday for for that day or that week. We would have a few birthdays, each month. And I would go around and have everybody in the vault room sign the card, and they would get like a, $10, $20 gift card. It wasn't anything major, but it kind of said to them like, hey, we actually do remember that it's your birthday today, even though you showed up for work, and you didn't take the day off necessarily, but it's still important. It's important. It's your birthday. It's the day you were born. Right. And so I know that my background is actually social work. And so I know that, things can be forgotten, birthdays, anniversaries, all those kinds of things. Your family, you may not have a huge family presence. And so it's nice for someone to acknowledge it and just make a point to say, happy birthday, even if it's not a major gift, it's still, they're acknowledging that like they think about you and they care enough to make a point to tell you happy birthday.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. It is amazing how those little small things make such a difference.
It is. Yeah. And so just stuff like that and holidays, because this industry runs pretty much every day. I mean, there are holidays that maybe banks are closed, but that doesn't mean that we don't run because there's other industries that are not closed on bank holidays. And so we service those locations as well, retail and things like that. So because of that, we work pretty much 6 days a week, sometimes 7, depending on the contracts. And so, there's holidays when people have to work or either the day before a holiday like Thanksgiving or something. Usually we're only off 2 days a year, Thanksgiving and Christmas. So those other, of course, Easter usually, but usually what we'll do is I would make like little gift bags because it's nice to be off like a holiday, but sometimes it's just not possible. And so, I would just make little gift bags, take the time in the evening. It's, it doesn't take a lot of time, but, have your kids help you, just put together some little gift bags with snacks, chips, candy bars, whatnot, and just say, hey, I appreciate you coming into work. It did involve me getting up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, to show up because routes would leave at like 4:45. And so, but just your presence being there saying that I care enough to get up, and come up there and bring these gift bags that I've made. And just to say, thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here. Thank you for, being a good employee. Cause it's, nobody gets stoked about working on a holiday,
Right.
So
Right. Yeah.
it's nice. I mean, it really made a big difference in the end. It sounds like trivial, but it made a huge difference. All my employees, like I never had anybody that didn't want to necessarily be there, at the company as a whole. And so it made a big difference. I mean, they would tell their friends like, hey, you should come work for my company. It's a great place. And so it really helped with hiring, all those things that you have to pay for, like Indeed and all these other ads that you need to run and spend thousands of dollars on. We had to spend a lot less, so it really made a big difference when word of mouth. And then of course, the employees that I had, they wanted, their best friends to come, the ones that they felt like would be successful as well, because it would show, I mean, it made them either look well or not. And so they made a point to really recommend people that were high caliber, that were really helpful in terms of moving forward in the company. And it really made a big difference. It really did.
Yeah. Well, I think they're proud of it. They're proud to work for you. And so they want to share that, when we're proud of something, we want to share it. And so I think that's really neat.
I definitely don't have a problem trying to hire now, but I have to say, wait, I don't have all this work yet. You have to wait.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It definitely, it continues to go, even if you aren't necessarily in that same company and you move somewhere different in the same industry. It will try to follow. So
yeah, one of the things I've noticed as we've worked with some of the various armored car companies has been that there's this mindset around I can't do that, or that's just not who we are. And so I'm going to just speculate a little bit around the kinds of people that are working for you, and that they're not people who you would call fluffy, and the kinds of people that are going to just maybe naturally gravitate toward doing those pleasant things, but they like it still, right?
That is correct. Yes.
Yeah, because they're a human being, and human beings want to know that the work they do matters and that they're cared for. And so, I can't tell you how many of your peers in the industry have said, "Oh, our guys wouldn't like that." Yeah, they do.
They do. It is definitely a male dominated industry. But, especially specifically staff as well. But that's not true. I'm not doing anything that someone else can't do. I promise you. It's, but you also need to have the actual care and consideration behind it. They need to see you show up with the bags. They can't just be like, drop them off. You went by Costco and bought a giant box of chips and dropped it off. It has to be something that you've put a little bit of time into yourself, because that shows real, true care and concern. And if they know that you care about them, they care about their job. They care about making sure they're doing their job well. And it makes a huge difference in the overall. I mean, in this industry, you obviously are concerned about theft primarily. It's one of the biggest issues. Obviously, you're carrying cash, right? And so I didn't have a lot of issue with that, because they knew that they were cared for. They knew, and when someone cares about you, you don't want to disappoint them. You don't want, you don't want to do anything to jeopardize that. And so I would say that the incidences of things like that occurring were much lower for me, because they had that moral compass right there, because they were like, well, wait a minute, let me, because a lot of it's based on opportunity, and if people think you care and they know, they see you present, it makes a big difference. And I'm not doing anything that someone else can't do. I promise you, it's not anything special. It's just, I had little ideas just to acknowledge the staff, show them that the company as a whole cares about them, and that we appreciate the work that they're doing every single day.
Yeah. Talk about your program too, for kind of the monthly raffle that you do.
So, a lot of employees, they're living at sometimes just a livable wage, and depending on what state you're in. And they have a lot of expenses of their own, right? And so a lot of them couldn't put money back into, their attire. We provided the shirts and things like that, but we didn't provide the pants, belts, just simple things that you don't think about. So we started a monthly raffle just to pull a name. We put everybody's name in like the basket. And then every single month we would pull the name out, and then they would win whichever they chose. So like a tactical type belt, or a tactical type book bag, so they could carry some of their items, lunch, things like that, or tactical pair of pants. And so those things, it made them feel better. It was not a huge expense. We might be at $30, $40 a month,
Right.
That's nothing. But everybody was so excited about the raffle. If I waited to the second of the month, I was getting text messages like, wait, when's the raffle? Did I miss the raffle? Because, we would send a mass email out like, hey, this is who won this month. Let me know what you chose. So it's, people get excited about it. It's something so simple and so inexpensive, but it made such a huge impact. And then it improved their appearance as well, in terms of, because they didn't have the money all the time to buy a new belt or to buy a new pair of pants. And so it added value across the board.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then you look more professional as an organization too.
It's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. I'm always think that's so interesting when a company doesn't provide the uniform or expect the people to pay for it, because it's just this extra expense that people don't necessarily have that kind of money.
Right. It's
so cool.
The pants situation. I know this sounds strange, but not every pair of pants fits every human.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Just say, which one do you want?
Yeah, exactly. That's great. That's really great. So in your earlier days of this, like, I mean, as a social worker, this is a little bit more ingrained in you, but
Yes.
like, how did you, what was your process for sort of thinking through some of these? Like, how'd you come up with some of these ideas?
I feel like, I mean, inherently as a social worker, and really as a human, you want to know that someone cares. You want someone to acknowledge that it's important, at least for me, that it's your birthday or it's just something simple. And so I could tell that, my staff, if I made a point to say, hey, and like just take an extra 5-10 minutes to talk to the one specific employee, not about anything they've done wrong, just ask them how their day was, how was your weekend, just simple things like that. And then get to kind of just know them a little bit. And then I kind of noticed a pattern where the more I did that and interacted like specifically one-on-one at times, the more open they seemed to be. And I felt like if I needed them, because a lot of times on route, things will come up quickly and you really need someone to go back or to, go off route to handle an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
And they were so much more willing to do that. I mean, like no pushback at all. So much more willing if I took the extra 5 minutes, like, 2 weeks ago, just to talk to them and see how their week was. And so it started to build a different type of relationship. And I mean, it takes a little more of your time, but in the end, it doesn't really, because they're so much quicker to respond when I really needed them to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of how it started to morph. I noticed changes in just their efficiency and their willingness to be a team player. And there wasn't so much of a divide. When I'd originally gotten there, there was a huge divide between the vault room staff and the route staff. It was like almost like they were not necessarily against each other, but it felt very like they were two separate units. But that's not really how it is. They really work hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're one whole team, it works so much better. It's so much more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started trying to put things in place to make everyone feel like one whole team. And once I started noticing things like that, it really made a big difference. And it just started morphing, and I started thinking of like just creative things like, hey, let me just write down everybody's birthday. It takes like, I don't know, 10 minutes out of my whole day, like 3 times a month, maybe, just to say, hey, sign this card, their vault room's there, or I'll say, hey, take this to the card at the vault room and have them sign it. Nothing major, but it just made a big difference. And so I started just piecing things together, and I noticed there was some staff that looked like they had been in the same uniform for quite some time, and they were starting to deteriorate a little bit. And I understand that financially, not everybody's in the same place. Of course, the social worker, right? I saw a lot of poverty. So I knew that, that's just not an expense they could budget at that time. And so we just kind of came up with this little idea, and I was like, let's just try a raffle and see, because everybody could use the help, right? Anybody would want to, and it's fun to win. It's fun to, get a little prize once a month. So it wasn't going to cost the company a lot of money, but it was something that made a huge impact for just little expense.
Yeah, that's great. We often recommend to people that or to organizations and leaders, instead of doing like an exit interview, figuring out why someone left, we recommend you do a stay interview where you basically ask them why they stay. And in this case, you were, almost just observing a little bit more around what would make their just days be better. But I think the other more maybe methodology around it too is actually just asking people why they stay, and what else could be done to improve their environment. I know in some of the armored car companies, it's basic things like, you can't roll down a window in these armored cars, right? Because if so, you're now risking the life of the driver and potentially being, robbed. And so, I mean, how necessary air conditioning is, and some of those things you've got to sit in the car now and then, I think too. Is that something you've done?
Yes.
Where you go on route with them?
Yes. I've been on route multiple times because you need to understand it. You need to understand what they're doing every single day. You
Mhm.
need to understand, what they're seeing on a day-to-day basis, how they're feeling. And yeah, there was a company that is no longer in existence that was notorious for not having air in their vehicles. It would just break all the time. So I had a lot of staff try to come from that company to mine because I would never intentionally send someone out with no air. That's crazy, especially in
Mhm.
Georgia. It gets hot here.
Oh, I
And,
know.
so yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to understand whether need to go on route or not. You have to go on route. You have to understand, like, them telling you, it just, if you've never been there, you don't understand. You really can't.
Uh-uh.
I think it's important to see how the check-in process works, because if you understand how it works, you can understand if they come to you and say, hey, this is an issue, or hey, can we do this instead to help my day go better and to help things run more efficient. And because you've been there and you understand what they're talking about, then you can say, oh, that's a great idea. And I always encourage my staff, if you have an idea that would make things run more efficiently and improve accuracy, please let me know. I'm happy to make changes and do things like that. And I think my willingness to be open to that also helped, because I didn't do every job every day. And
Mm-mm.
so if they had ideas, I'd be like, bring it to me. Let me know. I'm
Mhm.
happy to hear ideas.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I think it's crucial that every owner has to go on a route. It's important. You have to understand. And you definitely don't want to be in a van with no air. Even if you can roll the window down, it's hot in Georgia.
Yeah, I know. I know. Yeah, I was so sad when I saw that, or I read a bunch of the Glassdoor reviews in the armored car industry before the speaking engagement back in May, and I couldn't believe some of the things I read around what people had gone through. And
Yeah.
so, yeah. So, what would be some advice that you would give your fellow peers in terms of, like, just outside of this conversation? Is there anything else you would like to share with them around how they could maybe improve their employee experience?
Sure. I mean, I would just suggest that they try something small, like the birthday thing or the raffle, if they don't already offer the entire uniform, or even if they do, most of the time they don't offer the belt. It's simple things like that, or like a, clear book bag or whatnot, a new hat, just things like that. I mean, it makes a big difference. It's such a small expense. Or if there's a holiday coming, have some of your staff help you make gift bags, and not just buy the box of, chips at Costco, like put them together in the little brown bag, put the sticker on them or something, kids love stuff like that. So usually find some children to help, but, just, I know it sounds silly, but little things like that make a big difference. And then show up when they're giving those bags out. To see your face is huge. A lot of times, like I know at the company I was at, I was managing, but I wasn't the owner. And a lot of them didn't even know what the owner looked like.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. They need to know what you look like.
Yeah.
They need to see you and just ask them how their day is going or ask them how their weekend went. And then they know that I promise it only takes a few minutes out of your day, but it will have such a big impact, huge impact.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Well, Rachel, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for sharing some of your amazing tips. And we just hope that you continue to grow and you continue to add more and more staff. So thank you for joining me today.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for joining this exciting episode. We hope this discussion brings you closer to a better, healthier, and more rewarding workplace everyone deserves to be a part of. If you want more content like this, be sure to subscribe to the podcast at turningthecornerllc.com/podcast. Don't forget to share this with your friends in the corporate world. And together, let's make this space a hub of growth and job satisfaction. If everyone loves where they are, they can always give their best without regrets. That's all for now. See you on the next one.